Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our last talk of our NMSU Celebrates the National Parks series. It's been wonderful to have you join us throughout. We have a very special speaker today joining us from Washington, D.C., Julia Washburn. Before I introduce the speaker, though, I really do want to thank you all because we're celebrating the centennial of the Park Service this year, and some of you have worked for the Park Service. Many of us enjoy going to the parks, right? I've been teaching a seminar this term, a graduate seminar on that Julia joined us today about the meaning of the parks, and are they the American narrative? What are our parks? And what are they going to look like in the next century? And that's what Julia's going to talk about in part today. Our first speaker was from Chamizal, the National Monument in El Paso. And we had a couple of speakers from the State Historic Preservation Office that talked about historic trails that the National Park Service manages. And then Mission 66, which was a 10-year infrastructure project from 1956 to 1966. Ellen McGahee came to talk to us about the Manhattan Project National Historic Park. Is that right, Joy? And then last week, Bill Tweed talked about the future of the next century of the Park Service in terms of climate change. What happens when there's no Joshua trees in Joshua Tree National Park? What happens when the glaciers melt in Glacier National Park? We hope that this experience has started a conversation. And we hope that the experience has not just been about celebrating the last 100 years, but looking towards the next century. And what role do we play as park goers and as citizens in the national park story? And so we're very excited to bring in Ms. Washburn today to continue the conversation. One announcement before I introduce our speaker. I'm going to turn it to Dr. John Hunter, who has one more announcement about how the conversation is going to continue. Dr. Hunter just returned from several months on the road. He's driven by history. He's been documenting national parks and blogging about them. But he's going to tell us about one more speaker series this year on the national parks.
So to kind of wrap up this year of celebration for the centenary of the Park Service, there's 4 of us who are going to be talking to the Academy of Learning and Retirement. The first lecture is on Tuesday, December the 6th, and that's where I think Dr. Cupp's going to talk about the early park. Then Tuesday, December the 8th, Dr. Pitcairn is going to talk about the parks in the 20th century. And then skip to the next Tuesday, the 13th, Carol Campbell over there, Dr. Campbell from the geography, is going to talk about kind of the ecology and biology in the park and BioBlitz. And then on the last day of this, which is on December the 15th, I'll be talking about my travels. I've driven about 20,000 miles since May visiting our national parks. So that's with the Academy of Learning and Retirement.
Thanks, John. Well, with that, sorry for the delayed intro. Please help me welcome Julia Washburn. Julia is the National Park Service Associate Director for Interpretation, Education, and Volunteers, based in Washington, D.C. She's responsible for NPS public programming, volunteers in park programs, the Harper Ferry Center for Media Services, which deals with publication and interpretation of all types. This is where the center of interpretation is in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. And she wears a lot of hats. And you've been in your current position 6 years, is that right?
Correct.
But as she told us this in the seminar, her career began when she was 7 years old as a junior ranger in Rock Creek Park in Washington, D.C. So she's had a very long career with the parks. And today she's going to talk about new directions in NPS interpretation and education. So can you please give us a nice warm welcome?
Thank you, Dr. Cupp, and thank you, Dr. Pitcairn, for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to be here, really an honor. And I'm looking forward, Dr. Campbell, to being with your students tomorrow. That'll be a lot of fun. So I'm very, very honored to be here. I'm honored to be here among illustrious National Park Service retirees and volunteers and future volunteers and scholars and park lovers and students of all kinds. So I'm really, really pleased to be here. Thank you so much. And I did start my career at age 7, and I still have my And I keep this on my desk in my office as a tangible reminder that the experiences that we facilitate for people in parks actually really do make a difference, and they can have a profound impact on people's lives. They can even be transformational. And that's part of the role, I think, of the national parks, and the responsibility of the national parks is to make sure people have those opportunities for transformative park experiences. And so it's really an honor and a pleasure to be the Associate Director for Interpretation, Education, and Volunteers. And all of those 3 things fit together. Interpretation is what we call sort of the public programming in parks, but it's really education. Education, the way we refer to it in national parks, primarily is working with formal schools, K-12 and higher ed, but it's much more than that as well. And then volunteerism, for me, is the highest and best type of experience we can facilitate for people that allows them to make that deep personal connection to a place. If you give service in a place, you're going to forever be connected to that place. And you're going to have a deeper connection, a deeper love than if you just visit it. And so for me, volunteerism is a really important part of the interpretive operation of the Park Service. Even though a person might not be doing interpretation when they volunteer, they might be helping to build a trail, or they might be documenting changes in the landscape regarding climate change, or they might be helping in the office, you know, with filing. They could be doing all kinds of amazing things, but they're giving service and they're making that connection, and that's what it's really about. So I was invited to speak about new directions in interpretation education in the Park Service today, and going into the future, what we're projecting and what we're looking at in the future. And first of all, I want to ask, has anybody ever been to a national park before? If you've been to a national park, raise your hand, I want to see. So basically, almost, yeah, pretty much everyone. Okay, have you gone on a ranger tour or talk or walk? Many people. Have you seen an exhibit? Many people. Okay. Anybody volunteered? Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. So you're familiar with our programming. Basically, you have personal experience with our programming. And we have a long history of doing interpretation of parks. It really started with the first park ranger. It really started right at the beginning of national parks. And it's been evolving and changing over time. Dr. Cupp referred to our 50th anniversary, Mission 66, when we put a big emphasis on infrastructure and getting roads put in so people could get to parks, and building visitor centers and interpretive centers so people could experience and engage with parks. And for our 100th anniversary, we've been taking that a step further. We've been inviting people to find their park. And so I want to share with you one of our Find Your Park public service announcements from the Centennial. The volume is low. Can we get the volume up here?
And birds fly. Where mountains split up. Grass all around.
Oh, that's better. Let's start over so you can hear it.
There are oceans and rocks. Places where fish swim and birds fly. Where mountains spread up. And trees and grass grow all around. History is made, art is created, things happen that should always be remembered. Heroes emerge. A woman sets people free. A man makes light. A leader steps forward. People get together. They help each other out. They make their own places to run and play and contemplate the universe. There's pride and gratitude and fun. It belongs to everyone. It can be a place, a feeling, a state of mind. So get up, get out there, and find your park.
getting back to where I was before. So in celebrating our centennial and gearing up for the next 100 years, we've made this big invitation. Everyone come and find your own meaning in these places. Find yourself in these places and connect in the way that you want, in the way that you think parks are. So in order to really think about how to help people engage in the future, now, in the 21st century, and in the future, we've done a lot of thinking. And we invited scholars and experts to help us think. We have a Park System Advisory Board Education Committee under the leader of Dr. Milton Chen, and we invited them to think with us and help us discover what are the needs of 21st century audiences and what are the interpretive skills that our employees and our partners and our volunteers need in order to engage 21st century audiences effectively. So we worked with George Washington University and our advisory board and a professor named Dr. Lottie Lent, and we investigated a lot of current literature and past literature. We also had personal interviews with free choice learning professionals in the informal learning sector as well as the formal learning sector. And we put all of that together into a report on the vision for interpretation in the 21st century. So let me give you a little bit about what we found. So we found that there are some big societal shifts. Obviously, we're all aware of these, right? We're aware of some big shifts that are happening. And there's three big mega trends that affect our work. And one is lifelong learning. You know, access to the internet and access to social media has really changed the way that we find information and the way that we learn, and the way that we find community and share information with one another. And we're really a community of, a nation, a world of lifelong learners now. So it's not just, we're not just learning in school, we're learning throughout our lifetime. Globalization, a huge mega trend, right? How does the story of one park fit into a very big picture now that everyone has, a global system, if you will. And we're also obviously in the digital era, and how does that affect our interpretive media in our parks and how people actually plan to get to parks and what they do in parks and so forth. And so these are some major trends that are obviously having an impact. So there's effects of mega trends that are happening in society. And so you know these, you're probably familiar, or if not directly, then just on an instinctual basis, you're familiar with these trends. Very soon, we will be a truly multiracial and multi-ethnic society. We're moving that way very rapidly. North America's population is becoming urban. 82% is urban by 2050. 75% of the world's population will live in cities. This is a big change. We know that 95% of learning that people do throughout their lifetimes is actually happening outside of the formal school setting. So that impacts us. We can work with formal schools, but we also serve many people in many ways that are learning across a lifelong continuum. And we face a lot of really complex social and environmental issues. And I know you've been exploring some of them in this lecture series and in some of the courses that you're teaching. And so it requires complex thinking, systems thinking. It requires collaboration with scholars and communities. It really, these issues are complex and really need to be crowdsourced. The solutions need to be crowdsourced. And people are having a more active role because of the access to information and social media. There's expectations for people to be active. They want to be active in their personal lives, their lives in communities, and they want to be active in learning, and they want to be active in parks. So we had to consider all of those, and what does that mean for the regular interpreter, the person leading the tour, the person shaping the exhibit, the person providing the learning activity or experience, the person creating the website that's going to help you plan your trip, or the experiences that you might have virtually as opposed to personally in the park. And so we were considering 21st century audiences and what are some of their specific wants and needs, things that we know that our current and especially our future audiences really want and need. So we know they're coming from a wide variety of diverse backgrounds and experiences. We know they have information at their fingertips and they want it just in time. They want it right away. They're not necessarily as concerned about keeping volumes and volumes of information in their heads or available to them because they've got it at their fingertips. They're mobile. People there's migratory patterns towards cities, and people are moving around through global transportation. 21st century audiences learn by doing, and they want to control their own learning. They want to plot their own learning path. They want to go down the paths that they're interested in, not necessarily be dictated to. They're intrinsically motivated to learn, and often their motivation for learning can be very, very personal. They enjoy and need social learning experiences and relationship-based experiences. So it's a different set of needs than a 20th century audience had. Because of all these megatrends, our audiences are changing. And so we have some critical practices for interpretation that we've been needing to embrace, research, learn about, seek help on, and help our workforce, our volunteers, partners, and employees embrace. And so these come up in some categories. So we know that interpreters need deep knowledge of content, but now it's also important that they be well-grounded in learning theory and practice, and that they also can understand their audiences more deeply and respect different kinds of audiences. We know that they need more cultural fluency and more cultural competency, and they need to be self-aware of their own biases and their own journey on their own learning path, and they need to be sensitive to local and global cultural issues. So we're asking a lot more of our interpreters than we have in the past. They need to be able to facilitate interactions with audiences, and they need to understand digital media. They need to be digitally literate, and they need to be social media savvy. They need to be able to be fluent in the ways that people want to communicate. And we are encouraging them to have a reflective practice and to embrace evaluation and data to make decisions about the types of programming that they're going to offer and how they're going to create that programming. So these are some of our 21st century practices that we're trying to weave into our training and our support for our workforce and interpretation. And I think it's really important that we have deep knowledge of our audiences. We've been known for deep knowledge of our place, deep subject matter knowledge. And now we've got to have deep knowledge of our audiences, both our current and our potential audiences and our virtual audiences. And we have to be able to make some decisions based on what our audiences want, not what we think they want, but what our audiences, not what we think they want, but what they actually want. And we can do that by looking at data. So an example is that Shenandoah did a visitor study, and they realized that the majority of their visitors were not going into their visitor center anymore. They were actually out on the trails. They didn't need to go in to get oriented as much because a lot of the orientation material is available online. And even a lot of the trails are mapped online. And so they really, they were changing their way of visiting the park. And so Shenandoah decided to take interpreters out of the visitor center and deploy them out roving. And they were able to go from 8,000 visitor contacts in 2011 to 90,000 visitor contacts in 2013. Now, were those deep? How deep were those contacts? How meaningful were those experiences? We can evaluate and we can make assumptions about that. But they're certainly having FaceTime with a lot more people, and they're helping people connect where they are in real time in what they want to do and what they want to talk about, what they want to learn about. So we're looking at using visitor data to change the way we deploy our resources, our human resources and our financial resources. And then we need to evaluate and reflect and adjust. We're also using new techniques. We're using facilitated dialogue and various dialogic approaches to have conversations with visitors about controversial issues. Instead of giving a lecture, it's a conversation. Come and talk with a ranger. Come and have a conversation. And we're able to go deeper on a lot of more difficult topics that way. So that requires new training for interpreters. And we're asking our interpreters to be culturally competent and have cultural fluency, and be able to connect with multiple cultures, be able to have studied and found cultural guides, to know who's coming to their parks and who's not, and find ways of reaching those people who are not coming. So we're asking interpreters to do a lot more in terms of the cultural competency and looking at themselves and being self-aware of their own behaviors and the way they present. And so we're building these 21st century practices and building them into our work, building them into our strategic planning, our interpretive plans, our training programs. We're helping interpreters learn how to share power and authority with audiences, so as to invite audience meanings and knowledge and experience into the conversation and into the interpretive experience. We are helping them embrace digital media and have that just be part of the programming. We're experimenting now with augmented reality and virtual reality and trying to figure out what role that has to play with a place-based experience. There's a lot of interesting ways to think about that and learning to be done there. We're trying to shift from the didactic techniques to the co-created experiences. We're trying to shift away from the sage on the stage and be more of the guide on the side. We're building on those internal and external partnerships also to help us reach new audiences. We may not be reaching an audience, and it might behoove us to work with a group that already is reaching an audience, and instead of trying to do it ourselves, to get help and to find cultural guides and leaders in communities who want to connect with us. And we're trying to support diverse, culturally sensitive 21st century interpreters who have a deep understanding of audiences, their needs and desires. I will say this is a process. We're working on this. We have a long way to go on all of these. But this is the direction we're taking and the way that we're focusing. So we have a strategic plan for interpretation that takes us through 2018 that helps us start to chip away at some of these needs and desires. And it was a strategic plan that was developed and co-created with Park Service employees and partners across the field, as well as some scholars and external advisors and our advisory board members. It took about 18 months to do this planning, and I'm just going to give you a highlights of some of the aspects of the plan and some examples of some of the things we're doing. So the document is called Achieving Relevance in our second century, which is, you know, if we realize that if parks are not relevant to the public, then they probably won't exist in the second century. So it's very, very important that we ensure that the parks remain and increasingly become more and more relevant to the public. And we do have a vision. Our vision is that we're recognized as a valued and significant educator and a trusted interpreter of America's stories and heritage. And this is the key to it, that all audiences have multiple opportunities for participatory, transformative experiences that promote stewardship and relevant, inclusive, and active learning, with the end goal, ultimate end goal, of contributing toward a more scientifically literate, civically engaged society. So some of the things we're doing. We have one whole category or outcome area in our plan on relevance and inclusion, and we have a variety of strategies and goals under there. I'm going to share with you some of the things that we've been doing. One is that we've worked on improving accessibility in the park for people with disabilities. And this is really, really, really critical. We have a long way to go to really be truly accessible. And for me, it's not just about physical accessibility, it's about programmatic accessibility. It's about making sure everyone can hear the interpreters, can experience the exhibits even if they're low vision, can go on some of the trails and have some of the park experiences even if they use a wheelchair or assisted walking devices. It's about making sure that our programs and our exhibits are really universally accessible. We have a long way to go on this, but we do have a focus on it, and we have 3 big goals. One is we don't build or make anything new in the Park Service that isn't accessible. The second one is we're working hard to retrofit and make things that are not accessible wherever possible, with prioritization on the big key park experiences for each park. You might not be able to make all the trails in a park accessible, but you can make one of them that's a really important visitor experience. You can make that accessible. You might not make all your beaches accessible, but maybe you can have one that definitely is. So we're trying to retrofit, try to make things more accessible. And then the third goal is to train our employees to create a more welcoming environment for people with disabilities, and to make sure that our invitations and welcoming materials online are really clear, and that invite people with disabilities and explain where the opportunities are for the greatest connections. So this is a really big and important piece, and you'd think we'd be further along with it than we are, but we're really making it a priority. We're also working hard on uncovering and unburying multiple stories of the American narrative and adding parks to the system that fill in some of the blanks of people's stories that have been left out of the system. So Stonewall is one of the very newest national parks that came into the system. It commemorates and interprets the history of the LGBTQ civil rights movement and community. And we also just released a scholarly theme study on LGBTQ American heritage, which is going to be the basis for the interpretation that we do at Stonewall, and the basis for bringing more historic sites into the system. And we're trying to do that with all the multiple stories that have traditionally been left out of the mainstream American narrative. So we've done a Latino American heritage theme study and brought Latino American heritage sites into the system, like Cesar Chavez National Monument. We're working on an Asian and Pacific Islander American heritage theme study. We just finished a theme study on Reconstruction and the experiences of the American South in particular, and African Americans after the Civil War, and the experiences through Jim Crow and up through the Civil Rights Movement. So we're working on all of this. We're trying to make the stories more complete. We're trying to unbury the hidden stories and include those into the narratives. And we're trying to invite people to come and tell their own stories at parks, so that we are co-creating with people's experiences and not telling people's stories for them. It's a challenge, but it's a good goal. An example of a really neat program that happened recently was the 50th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March was commemorated, and as part of the commemoration experiences, we invited through an essay contest, we invited 150 high school and college-age students to come and spend 5 days recreating the march. And we called it the walking classroom, and every day the students marched part of of the way from Selma to Montgomery, and every night they camped out, and they had campfire experiences where they had discussions, facilitated dialogue, and talked about the events at Selma and the civil rights movement and what that means to them in their current lives and what it means for American society. And the day that we started the walking classroom was on the day that Dr. King and his foot soldiers actually made it across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So we walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge together, and you can see how proud these young people are and how excited and motivated and they were by the experience. And these young people have stayed together as a community of practice, and they have monthly webinars together to keep on learning, keep on talking, and keep on sharing experiences. It was really, really moving. Some of the young people who went on the walking classroom were from Ferguson, Missouri, and this was very close to after the riots in Ferguson, and they actually came on a bus ride across country with some of their school officials and some of the law enforcement officials from Ferguson on a bus tour, stopping at civil rights sites along the way to get to Selma, and having conversations all along the way. So really powerful, really relevant, really meaningful programming that is happening all across the service in different pockets. We're also, as I mentioned before, trying to connect with communities, organizations that are reaching communities that we really want to reach. So we're not doing a terrific job of reaching low-income kids of color. So through a national agreement with the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, we're working together with them to have them bring their kids to parks and to co-create programming with their educators so that we can create programming that's really relevant to those kids. We're doing the same with YMCAs and a variety of other youth-serving organizations. One's called the National Alliance for Faith and Justice, which is specifically about mentoring young black kids to keep them in school. And they reach kids, I think, in 10 different cities across the country, and we're connecting them with the parks and park rangers that are close by to their sites and working with them. So those are some of the examples. Has anyone heard of Every Kid in a Park? Anyone heard of Every Kid in a Park? I got one, maybe two. So in 2015, President Obama said, no matter who you are or where you live, every kid should be able to enjoy America's parks, monuments, lands, and waters. And he decided that he wanted the federal government to give a free pass to every fourth grader in America so they could bring their families and their friends and their sisters, brothers, aunts, mentors with them to a park. It's also good for any of the federal public lands. And so he said that in February of 2015, and he wanted the pass to be ready to give out in time for the school year, at the beginning of the school year of 2015. So we didn't have any legislative authority for the pass, and we didn't have any programming in place, and we didn't actually have anything. And so we set to it, and we made it happen. We launched the program in the fall of 2015. And the way the program works is there's a website designed by and for kids. They go on and they download a paper voucher, which works as a pass, but they can also exchange it at the fee booth for a plastic pass. So in last school year, 2,200,000 people downloaded the passes. So we know that, at least a lot of people were downloading those passes. Not all of them were exchanged for the plastic pass at the fee booth, but we did reach many, many kids, and we had over 90,000 Every Kid in a Park activities for fourth graders. Why fourth grade, you ask? Because it's a good age. Because it's an age where kids are still in one classroom with one teacher, so it's easy to get them on field trips, easier to get them out on field trips. And it's an age where they're very much open to new things and aren't yet distracted by adolescence. And research shows that if you expose kids to nature before age 11, it sticks with them longer, and they have a lifelong connection to nature. So we couldn't give one to every kid in America. It wasn't feasible, so we chose fourth grade. Some of the things we're doing in the category of educational leadership in our strategic plan. We have a Teacher Ranger Teacher program, and this started actually in the Denver area, and it's gone national. A teacher can basically be a teacher in residence in a park, be a ranger for the summer, and then go back to the classroom as a teacher. During that time that they're a teacher in residence in the park, they get to learn a lot of content information, but they get to help the park create programming, and they also are able to share their expertise and knowledge with the park rangers so they can expand their knowledge about educational practices. So we've had over 200 teacher ranger teachers doing those teacher in residences across the parks in the summers. Another example is we're in the second year of a grant from the Department of Education to run a citizen science and science, technology, engineering, mathematics program with Bureau of Indian Education and tribal schools, where it's an after-school program. So it's an ongoing program for the whole school year, and the schools partner with the parks. Kids go to the parks and they collect data and learn how to analyze the data, and they get an extended and deep experience with the parks over time. So we've got that going in about 10 parks, and it's a pilot program. We're hoping to expand that. That's another single example. There are many, many examples. And we have formed a national agreement with the Department of Education and have been working with them on their Green Ribbon Schools program, and they've been working with us on sharing information with all the schools in America about the work that teachers and kids can do in parks. It's been a really interesting and good partnership, and it's been good because it has sort of legitimized and lifted up the role of the parks as education institutions as being formally recognized and partnered with the Department of Education. Been doing a lot with digital media and learning. We participated in Digital Learning Day, which is one day a year when digital learning is emphasized in classrooms across the country. We've been working to improve our distance learning technology and our distance learning programs. I have a friend who's a park ranger at Dinosaur, and he's been doing using iPads and Skype to climb up on the cliff faces and connect through Skype with classrooms and be able to use his iPad to show the kids the fossils in the fossil record in real time and talk to them about it when they're back in their classrooms, maybe in New York or Nebraska or wherever they are. So park rangers are using digital media in more and more innovative ways. I'm going to do a time check. We're also trying really hard to emphasize active engagement. And we're trying to invest in stewardship culture around service learning. So engaging, many high school kids and college young people need service learning credits to graduate. We've been partnering with schools to try to deepen those service learning experiences and have the kids do those experiences at parks. We've been engaging more senior volunteers and inviting them to bring their vast amounts of knowledge and experience to help us out wherever we can. We're very proud that this year we topped over 400,000 volunteers, which is the most the Park Service has ever had. And so it's working and people are engaging, which is exciting. So a lot of good things happening. I touched on a few. I want to make sure we have time for conversation. But before we do that, I wanted to share one more video with you. Because after all, it is the birthday of the National Park Service. And many more. So this is Ida Fry. She's a Super Junior Ranger. She's got over 300 Junior Ranger badges, and she goes around promoting the program. So she's kind of one of our informal Junior Ranger spokespeople, and so historically she's a very good company. So conversation, questions, ideas, comments, concerns. I know we have some very experienced park service people in the room, and I invite ideas from everyone. Yes, sir.
I think it's very good steps that you guys are taking to promote, to address the cultural diversity issues in the park, like how to get all people together,
Thanks.
enjoy the parks, especially with interpretation. I thought it's a good one too, especially address like particular bilingualism and linguistics. That can be kind of a bit of a challenge when you're trying to get certain members of the population to come and enjoy the parks, even with staff. Sometimes, but you guys are taking good steps to address, some of those language barriers, with interpretation, with staff, and with things like that. So, and even I noticed you guys are trying to do it in Spanish too, trying to get the Spanish population to go out and then go to the parks, which is really good. And I think those are good steps to get, to really step up the cultural diversity interpretation. Staff and marketing.
We're working on it. The Find Your Park campaign is also in Spanish. The Every Kid in the Park website has been translated and is about to be launched in Spanish. And some parks are actually putting a language requirement into their job announcements for interpreters to also be bilingual. So we're making progress. I will say we have good intentions and good strategies. We've got good examples popping up all over the service. We have a long way to go. So my mantra is never give up, never ever give up. Keep working on it. So we're going to keep working on inclusion. But yeah, we're working on it, but we're trying, but we have a long way to go.
But they're good steps so far.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm in Dr. Capel's history class, and we were just talking about digital history and digital public history. So when you design a digital history exhibit, what do you try and hit? Like, what are the things that you're trying to achieve? And how do you make sure it's accessible and comes off well for the viewer? I'm not articulate.
I get it. Well, in a lot of our exhibitry, we're integrating digital technologies now, and we're using video a lot more. Especially short clips. We're trying not to make, we still have parks that want to make really long films. We're trying to get them to make lots of really little short films. But in terms of using the digital world to interpret history, a couple of things, there's a lot of different people working on it. The one young woman who's about to win a national interpretation prize, she knows she's made it to the regional level of winning, is using she's using augmented reality to help people see what scenes in her park used to look like, and helping them connect that way, and then facilitating online discussion about then and now and the changes to the landscape over time. So she's using the technology to enhance the visitor experience, and she's using the technology to engage in a dialogue. So I think that digital media is best used as a way to help people go deeper into the physical experience or somehow into the content. It should never take the place of the physical experience, but it can certainly augment and help. And at times when you can't physically get to a place, it's certainly a good alternative. We now have quite a few online museums. So we've gotten artifacts digitized and then organized into online museums, so that you can have a museum experience. You can do 360s, look at objects from all sides, up and down, and have interpretation related to it. Working with Google, and doing, we're part of, I forgot what it's called, Google Cultural Institute, where they take primary source documents and photographs and make sort of online exhibits using those documents. So there's a lot of different ways we're approaching it. The way I look at digital technology with interpretation, that it's not an either or, it's kind of a both and. And if people don't want to engage digitally in parks, if they want to put away their technology, they can. But if they want to use their technology to the extent possible, they should be allowed to use it. So we're working on wiring and getting Wi-Fi into lots of parks. You probably still won't be able to get a signal at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, but you'll get it on the South Rim. So I saw a hand here, yes.
Yeah. So other than creating multilingual parks to create inclusivity with people who are going to these parks, are you guys focusing on creating an inclusive language when approaching people who are attending these parks? Is that something you guys are focusing on with your inclusivity?
When you say an inclusive language, could you describe what you mean?
When you approach a person with gender pronouns, are you focusing on creating that?
We're beginning to do that. We're beginning to help people understand that it's okay to ask what pronouns you go by, and not presume, right? We are embracing the non-gendered bathrooms and working really hard on that. I would say embracing the trans community is something we're just starting to work on. I think we have a lot of training to do on that, but it is definitely a priority. And we're reinforcing that with our interpretation and adding LGBTQ sites and stories in there. And so we've had the Director Jarvis described an experience that he had where a young man who is openly gay said to him recently that Stonewall meant so much to him because to him, in his own words, he said it meant he could really truly be who he is. It's part of the documented and sort of, what is the word I'm looking for, sanctioned American narrative now. So we're working on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes.
What do you look for in your interpreters that you're hiring? It's a federal position, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Biologists, are you full spectrum?
So the federal hiring process is complicated, and I will say we're hiring federal employees, but our partner organizations are also hiring. So, like for example, if you go to Golden Gate National Recreation Area, you might be employed by the National Park Service, or you might be employed by the Golden Gate Conservancy, which could be doing the same work. So we're blending our staffs. But when we're looking to hire interpreters, we have a set of what's called knowledge, skills, and abilities. And what we're actually doing, right, and we have a set of position descriptions that are for the Park Ranger series, if you will, the Park Ranger job series with which interpretation falls in. And those position descriptions haven't been updated since 1989. So this year, we embarking on a process of updating the Park Ranger series position descriptions and getting them, working with OPM and our classifiers to get them classified so they reflect the 21st century skills that we were talking about here. So our job descriptions, once that's changed, our knowledge, skills, and abilities, we're going to be hiring for some of the types of skills that I just described to you. So technology fluency, social media fluency. We're looking for, we're still looking for subject matter expertise, but we're also looking for the education overlay. So we're looking for people, with museum education degrees. We're looking for people who not just have deep content knowledge, but also understand how to engage the public. And a lot of that we'll do with training as well, and it's going to take time. But we're trying to hire for the skill sets that we need for the future.
It's really, one of my daughters is in Vista Airport. She's the state program director for the state of Mexico.
Oh, good for her.
Yeah. Anyway, the job descriptions that when she applied, she was already a Vista AmeriCorps volunteer with her master's degree, and then she went on. I said, this doesn't even match what you do. And she goes, but Mom, I have this, and I mean, she had a checklist in her head of all the skills she's done.
She could fit them under?
Yeah, and I just went, but it's not, and she goes, you deal with what you have.
With the federal hiring system, you deal with what you have. Luckily, I have a little bit of control. I can change the position descriptions and the job announcements if I get them sanctioned by the Office of Personnel Management. So we're working on that. But as I said, our position descriptions are 30 years old. So.
Yeah, and what you're doing now is just totally.
It's completely, it has its roots in the same work, but it's a new layer of skills. Yeah.
How do you bring your people that have been in the system for a long time up to the new level?
Training, and some of them are already on it. Some of them are so excited and are learning and growing on their own, and other people wish we would leave them alone. It's the kind of the way it is in any organization, where you have, your early adopters and your really excited folks, and then you have the people that come along with training and with encouragement, and then you have a group of people who are never going to come along, right? And so I don't waste a lot of time with them. I just work with the people who want to learn and want to grow and change. And I don't have hiring and firing authority in parks, so I'm not worried about that. I move with the people who want to do the work. Yes?
How do you approach educating the public and how global warming is affecting parks?
Pardon me. I just swallowed wrong. Your question was so hard. It's an excellent question. We've been working on it for about 6 years. There are a lot of techniques for talking with people about climate change, and there's a lot of research ongoing about how to do that effectively. There's also a lot of good research on the public in general and what sort of category they fit into in their continuum of learning around climate change. And you have the climate change believers, and you have the climate deniers, and then you have people in between in different stages. There's some people who, a vast majority of people who agree that climate change is real and that it's a problem, but they don't quite understand it and they really don't know what they can do about it. And that's the sweet spot, right? Because we don't need, the people who are already on board, they're good, we don't need them. And the people who are completely going to deny it, we can't change them, so we should go. We should go with the vast majority of people in the middle who are concerned and think it's a problem but don't understand enough about it. So the great thing about parks, well, it's a sad thing and a great thing, is that you can really see the tangible impacts of climate change in our parks. I mean, the glaciers are receding. The sea turtles are migrating further north. We are losing species. We're seeing changes in the phenology of parks. That's the changes in time over the seasons. When the birds are migrating at a different time of year, the caterpillars are hatching at a different time of year. That doesn't always sync up. The birds don't have the caterpillar. I mean, there's a lot of tangible evidence that you can actually show. Sea level water rise, that sort of thing. And when you can show, you can use augmented reality. You can show we were talking about the Statue of Liberty earlier. Our Lady of the Harbor is going to be wading in the water in about 10, 15, 20 years. And you can use augmented reality to show what it looks like now and what it's going to look like, right? So you can, there's a lot of, and we also talk about not trying to change anyone, but to get them to bend a little bit and to think, maybe to consider a couple different ways of thinking about it, or new points of view, or help them learn a little bit about the science. Maybe they don't have to learn all about the hydrocarbons and all the chemical reactions that are going on, but they can start to understand a little bit more about what's happening. So the technique, first of all, one thing we don't do is we don't offer climate change tours because nobody goes on them. So we offer birds and bees tours or salamander tours, or, and we integrate the climate change information along the way. And we also have done some studies that show us that quite a few, large majority of park visitors do want to hear about it. They might not want it to be the sole part of their education experience or an enjoyable interpretive experience in the park, but they do want to hear about it. So weaving it in. And then using dialogic techniques to have conversations. And so when you have a conversation, the audience members start educating each other, and offering their own information and experiences. And so it's no longer the interpreter being the only one talking about it. It suddenly becomes a group conversation and people offer different perspectives. So we have a couple tools out. We have some training modules, and we're just about to release a climate change interpretive plan. And all of that will be online, but the modules are already online. So, yes?
I'm from Anchorage, Alaska, and so I've like noticed this conversation about climate change, like Portage Glacier, national parks, stuff like that, and there's always a big feature of these parks is how the glaciers are receding, and the pictures from like 1950 and 2009 or whatever are like a startling difference. So I've seen, since I lived there, like.
Yeah, we're integrating it into our wayside exhibits. So you're looking at a glacier, you can see a historical photo of the same spot. You don't even need the digital, it's just there on the wayside. Yeah, we're working on it. Again, it's a journey. But, yeah. Yes, sir.
I have a question that it might be too soon to ask.
Okay.
Last week, the group that occupied Malheur Wildlife Refuge were acquitted. Has the National Park Service and their interpreters discussed what this might mean? Or is it too soon to ask that question?
So I think it's fair to say there's probably a lot of discussion going on informally. The Secretary of the Interior has written about it and spoken about it publicly. From the point of view of saying, of course we honor the courts and the verdict of a jury, but that it's very disappointing and concerning, especially for the employees who have dedicated their lives to public service, who live in these communities, and have to experience a lot of harassment and negativity because they're public servants. And so it's more kind of at the moment, it's more a kind of a we care about you empathy stage. I think it is too soon to understand like the law enforcement conversations and the and any like strategy conversations at the moment. But that may be happening more in the Pacific West region right now, and the Intermountain region. I'm in the East. It's less of an issue for us in the East. It is an issue for us from a political point of view, but it's different when you live out in the West. So I think it's a little soon, but it is starting to be talked about. Yes.
First, I would like to say the Junior Ranger program. Are you looking towards changes in that program as well, or because seeing from the example right there, got a great example there, but I know that sometimes, let's think about it, kids today, the little kids today, they're more concerned with what's going on with games and such like that. Are you trying to see if you can try to reach them with changes in the Junior Ranger program as well?
So it's funny that you asked that, because on November 21st we're having a co-creating design meeting, and we're going to have some of our Super Junior Rangers there and some regular kids there, and we're also going to have some guests from the technology world, and also some scholars who are working on information science and educational technologies to think about this very topic, because it's time to have a mobile Junior Ranger program with digital badging, and it's time to embrace augmented and virtual reality in the Junior Ranger program, and it's kind of important for us to get out ahead of that a little bit. Pokemon Go took us by surprise, but we embraced it. We are offering Pokemon Go tours. Can somebody explain what Pokemon Go is for those who don't know? Yes.
It's like a virtual. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's like a virtual reality. It's like a virtual reality, like GPS-based Pokemon thing where you can walk around and your phone GPS finds wild Pokemon, and then you can throw like the little balls at them and catch them. So it's like a collection-based set type thing. And like for children of the 90s, it was like all of our dreams came true, because it was bringing this childhood experience into the real world and then making us go out. Like over the summer, my friends and I, like, we're on campus in the summer, and there were like hundreds of people, like at our duck ponds and stuff. So it's a way, yeah.
Did you have any Pokemon gyms on campus?
Yeah, there are so many. There are so many, and where I work is like a stop, so I can like sit at my desk and like collect. It's the best.
So people who were children in the 90s grew up with the Pokemon game of the cards, and they traded the cards and they played the Pokemon game. And then it went digital very recently, and so those children who are now, in college and graduate school in their 20s, were so excited. And so the Pokemons are little monsters, and you catch them with your phone. And then there's gyms where you put them all so you can train them. And so it's it's an interactive social media virtual reality game. So there are these Pokemon monsters all over the national parks. And there are Pokemon monsters in places where there shouldn't be Pokemon monsters. Like on the edge of the Grand Canyon over the railing. So because they use big extensive databases to place all these Pokemons, and the people who created the game really didn't have any idea where the Pokemons are going to be because they used all these databases to put them in. So we have Pokemons all over the place, and we have people endangering themselves trying to catch the Pokemons, but we also have people coming to parks that maybe never came before because they're trying to catch the Pokemons in that park. And so we started organizing Pokemon Go excursions. So you can go with a park ranger to catch Pokemons in the park. And by the way, when you catch the Pokemon next to the FDR Memorial in DC, you can also have a little interpretive experience about the FDR Memorial. I know Dr. Kakavli is sitting there going, oh my God. The thing is because these Pokemons are very over all kinds of places, they're also in places that are reverent places, like sanctuary type places that maybe they shouldn't be. And so we're trying to get them removed from certain places, but we're embracing them in other places. So the idea with designing a new junior ranger program that's mobile is that maybe we can, instead of running to catch up, maybe we can get out ahead a little bit. So, long answer.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question. Or another round of applause. Thank you very much.